In recent years, the United Kingdom has seen some of the most controversial criminal convictions to date. From a woman sent to prison for a social media post to a convicted child predator who was free to walk the streets. These cases have led to media attention, sparked viral campaigns, and led to fierce protests.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
I hope it doesn't watch you live in this programme, Mr. Edwards.
Hey, watch. Yeah, come on. Vehicles were set alight and projectiles thrown at riot police by people believed to be supporters of the English Defence League.
This is absolutely ridiculous. How am I going to go in? We haven't done anything wrong.
You're not going to do it one-on-one. You're not going to do it one-on-one.
When Lucy Letby returned from a trip to Europe in 2016, she told her work colleagues how excited she was to be getting back to work. Letby worked on the newborn unit at the Countess of Cheshire Hospital, and she was expecting her first shift back on duty to be a busy one. She appeared to take great pride in her job, but underneath the surface, she was hiding a dark secret. On the night she returned to work, a set of triplets were born, but sadly, 2 of them lost their lives, allegedly due to complications. But the truth was much more terrifying and would uncover one of the most twisted cases of murder the UK had ever seen.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
These deaths were not isolated incidents, and some of the deaths had aroused suspicion with the parents and even the hospital itself, who contacted Detective Superintendent Paul Hughes at Cheshire Police. Hughes would open an investigation where he discovered that the hospital were aware of the number of infant deaths and had moved several staff to other departments in an effort to solve the mystery. But even with new staff, the number of deaths remained high. But something wasn't adding up, and while police were investigating the deaths of around 17 infants, they received a report that revealed some of the deaths were anything but natural. This was the start of Operation Hummingbird, where police would spend the next several months analysing medical records and shift patterns of the hospital, and one thing soon became clear. The one person who was on shift and alone with the infants when every death occurred was Lucy Letby. In June 2018, 2 years after the tragic death of 2 of the triplets, she was arrested in her home.
Hello, Lucy, is it?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Cheshire Police. Look, it's Stefan, 2 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, not a problem.
Put you in the back seat over here. Hold on, man. Yes. Okay, just take a seat in there for me, Lucy. I'll move that seat forward a bit. Sure. Yeah, I've just had knee surgery. So. Oh, right, okay.
According to Letby, she was dragged out of her home by police, but the body camera footage clearly shows her walking out of the home without the use of force. This would be the start of the controversial case that still continues to this day. Although the evidence pointed to Letby being the main suspect, there wasn't any physical evidence of her crimes or eyewitnesses. But when police searched Letby's home, they found handwritten notes that seemed to point to her guilt. She'd written disturbing messages, including one that simply said, "I am evil. I did this." And this, along with the fact she was the only nurse on duty on the night infants died, were just some of the evidence that eventually convinced the jury she was guilty.
In their totality, the offences of murder and attempted murder were of exceptionally high seriousness, and just punishment, according to law, requires a whole life order.
She was sentenced to 14 whole life orders, which means she'd never see freedom again. She appealed the sentence, unsuccessfully, and still fights for her freedom today. And interestingly, several senior staff of the hospital were arrested for gross negligence and manslaughter, with further inquiries ongoing, leading many to believe this case is far from over. July 7th, 2023. One of the UK's biggest newspapers released an exclusive story about a prominent journalist who'd been accused of a horrific crime against a child. Over the next several days, it was revealed that the journalist in question was BBC News presenter Huw Edwards, after his wife came forward and publicly named him. He'd been accused of paying money to a 17-year-old boy in exchange for explicit images, and all to fund a drug habit he'd kept secret for years. Despite the allegations, there was no evidence to back up the claims, which Edwards said left him desperately depressed and unable to work. Behind the scenes, the accusations were growing, with many former colleagues reporting stories of worrying behaviour. Even with these new claims, Edwards maintained his innocence. But on November 8th, 2023, a new revelation would bring him back into the spotlight once again. While investigating a separate case, police found Edwards' personal number in the phone of a major convicted offender named Alex Williams. It was revealed that Edwards had received almost 400 explicit images from Williams, and they all involved children. Edwards would eventually plead guilty to all charges at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 31st of July 2024, but would manage to avoid prison, instead receiving a suspended sentence, much to the fury of the British public. This ruling left many asking if the justice system was in desperate need of reform. Despite his crimes, Edwards wasn't deemed a threat to the public, even though it was later revealed that there had been complaints made about Edwards as far back as 2012. Not one of those complaints had been fully investigated, and many blamed his employers and the police for failing to take actions when they had the chance. Edwards' sentence was seen as far too lenient, with many arguing he should have been sent to prison to serve his sentence instead of being allowed to enjoy the freedom of the outside world. 29th of July, 2024, and a brutal knife attack at a community centre in Southport left the United Kingdom in mourning and shock. The centre was hosting a Taylor Swift-themed event when an attacker forced his way in and unleashed a vicious attack, killing 3 young girls and leaving an entire town gripped with fear. The suspect was later identified as Axel Rudakabana, whose parents had immigrated to the UK before he was born, and almost immediately the protests began, with many blaming the UK's immigration policy as part of the problem. One of those who spoke out was Lucy Connelly, a former childminder and wife of a councillor in Northampton. When she saw the news of the attacks, she immediately took to social media to express her outrage. But that one social media post would change her life forever. In the tweet, she called for mass deportation and even suggested setting fire to several hotels around the UK that were housing immigrants who were awaiting processing. She deleted the post only hours later, but over 300,000 people had seen it, and the damage was done. Many saw the post as freedom of speech and even suggested Connelly had the right to speak out. But according to the Public Order Act 1986, the social media post was threatening and was intended to stir up racial hatred. Based on this and the sheer exposure the now deleted post had received, Connelly was arrested and charged with stirring up racial hatred. She was found guilty at Birmingham Crown Court in October 2024, where she was sentenced to 31 months in prison with the possibility of an early release. The case sparked mass debate around the UK, with many calling for her release and an overhaul of the justice system. Connelly was released after 9 months, having served around 40% of her sentence, and almost immediately she began a series of television interviews where she'd claim she'd been a political prisoner and felt she'd been treated unfairly, especially as another politician had escaped charge after being accused of a similar crime. Connelly's case would attract the attention of many politicians, the Free Speech Union, and even Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who would claim freedom of speech itself was under threat in the UK. But it must be taken into consideration that Connelly did plead guilty to her crime and only appealed after she'd been imprisoned. She also claimed a victory at securing an early release, but she'd served 40% of her sentence, which is normal for someone who has been a model prisoner. Which leaves us with one of the most controversial convictions of all time. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, otherwise known as Tommy Robinson, is a political activist who has been in trouble with the law on several occasions between 2005 and 2014. But in May 2017, he caught the attention of the police and the media after he filmed defendants from a trial involving a child exploitation gang and then live-streamed the footage to social media. This is strictly forbidden under UK law, as it could potentially affect the outcome of the trial and sway the jury's decision. Robinson was given a 3-month suspended sentence for contempt of court, but he would claim he was only reporting the facts. He maintained his extreme views had made him the target of a political witch hunt, where the government was determined to lock him away at all costs. Exactly 1 year later, in May 2017, Robinson found himself at odds with the law again, after he live-streamed information about another child exploitation case that was going on at Leeds Crown Court. Only this time, he live-streamed from outside the courthouse itself, while the jury was still deliberating their decision. Robinson was arrested again for the crime of contempt of court, but maintained he was being silenced and targeted by authorities for providing the public with information that was not shared by the media, and information that would blow the controversial child exploitation trial wide open. He was jailed for 13 months, but in a shock turn of events, he'd had that conviction quashed. The proper procedures weren't followed by the judge. After the Robinson case had rushed through court in a matter of hours, Robinson used this to his advantage, claiming he was a victim of a kangaroo court and a corrupt system, and he'd been treated unfairly and unlawfully by both police and the government. Let us know what you think about these cases and how you would have done things differently. Are these convictions justice served, or are they a sign that the system needs reforming in every single way? And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can keep up with the next exciting case on Caught and Convicted.